welcome everyone to this latest edition of Neighbourhood Scope, a monthly series we do at ORF, examining issues in the region, exploring new opportunities and possibilities. And today we want to discuss, in a sense, the Bay of Bengal region and BIMSTEC and connectivity projects. But since we are talking about connectivity from India, we also have an expert to talk about not just what happens on the east of India, but also what happens to the west of India. We have a very good panel with us today. We have Ambassador Sumit Nakandala, who's the former Secretary General of BIMSTEC. We have Mr. Prashant Parameswaran, who's from Thailand, and he is the founder of ASEAN Wonk newsletter and a fellow at the Wilson Center. We have Dr. Meena Singh Roy from the IDSA. You're still with the IDSA? Former IDSA, but one of the leading experts on connectivity projects and on West Asia in India. And we have Anasuya Basu Ray Chaudhary, Senior Fellow at ORF's Calcutta Center. So a very warm welcome to all the panelists and all the people who are attending this session in person. It's a very rainy day in Delhi today. A lot of people are caught up in traffic jams and snarls. So the people who have braved coming to ORF today, thanks a lot. So I want to start with Ambassador Nakandala. You've been, sir, a Secretary General of the BIMSTEC. It's an organization which is almost 20 years old now. We hear a lot about its promise and its potential, but we see very little of it on ground, if I might say so. And please feel free to correct me. And I want to know why, despite the fact that it has that promise and potential, it hasn't quite worked out the way it is intended to work out. What is the reason? Is it differing trade policies of countries? Is it a failure to harmonize tariffs and other factors? What is it that is preventing BIMSTEC from achieving what it has set out to achieve, sir?
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, ORF, for inviting me for this discussion today. I'm very glad Anusha is also there because she has been working with the Bay of Bengal and BIMSTEC for some time. In order to address the question that you posed, which is very legitimate, I think, anybody and everybody will say that the BIMSTEC was formed in 1997. Now it is more than 27 years old. What have we achieved? It's a very legitimate question. Every political scientist or economist will pose that. What have we been doing? Now, I would like to take a different view on that because when it was formed in 1997, it was not 7 members. It was BIMSTEC, that is Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand Economic Cooperation. And in fact, there were different political alignments within the subcontinent. That also coincided with the India's policy look east and then Thailand's policy look west. Whatever it is, after the establishment of 1997, by 2004, BIMSTEC was able to focus on economic cooperation and integration. That is why in 2004, the framework agreement on the BIMSTEC FTA was finalized. Now, since then, there had been ups and downs, of course, national governments. Now, one thing I need to tell that I said that in few weeks ago in Thailand, when we had the third BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Economic Dialogue. BIMSTEC is a member-driven organization. Now we need to keep that in mind very clearly. It is not like United Nations, or it is not like UNESCAP. If we have time, certainly I will bring the role played by UNESCAP in forming BIMSTEC at a latter part of the discussion. Now, so it is the members' drive, members' desire, members' commitment to drive the organization for desired goals. For me, it is the economic cooperation and integration. Now, since then, I think, as I said, there had been changes in the national governments within the member states. So there had been ups and downs. Now, BIMSTEC Secretariat was formed in 2014. I became the first Secretary General, and I had a formidable task in establishing the BIMSTEC Secretariat in Dhaka. Now, I had this problem. Of course, I have been looking at the regional organization elsewhere in the world. I mean, for example, European Union. Sorry. On the other hand, in the neighborhood, we have ASEAN. I always felt that in order for regional organization to succeed, there should be a champion, or there should be a member state who will take the process forward along with the other countries. In 2014, I didn't see anybody. Well, there are two major economies in our grouping. That is India, number one, and the other one is Thailand. So I had a formidable task in convincing that India should take the lead along with the others. It doesn't mean that you run with the baton alone, but how do you take the process forward? Now, that process culminated in, as you all very well aware, in 2016 BRICS BIMSTEC Outreach Summit in Goa, 16th of October. I think that has ignited the process of getting everybody interested. And I was there, and then we agreed on number of items, like 16 projects or ideas, chaired by Indian Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi. Since then, I think we have come a long way. Only problem what we have at the moment is that lack of progress in the BIMSTEC FTA. Now, if you see the FTAs in elsewhere, especially SAARC, we have learned lessons from SAARC. When we started the trade negotiations in 2004, we started parallel process. It is not only trade in goods, it is trade in goods, it is trade in services, then investments, custom cooperation, and all the entire thing together. But in 2015, when we had the 21st TNC meeting, the whole negotiation broke out. That is where we are. But then there are very positive aspects, like BIMSTEC master plan for transport connectivity has been finalized. BIMSTEC grid interconnection has been finalized. Then BIMSTEC maritime transport agreement has been finalized. Number of things have been finalized. Now, I just wanted to end by saying that success of a regional organization cannot be determined by the number of years that it will take. Now, I just wanted to mention that when the European coal and steel community was formed in 1950s, none of the founding fathers never thought that it will end up with the economic union 50 or 60 years down the line. So it takes time. That is number one. We also need to understand mutual sensitivities of the member states. How do you accommodate these sensitivities? That is number two. Number three is that we also need to essentially, I think, in the Bay of Bengal, we need to understand the historical perspectives of the Bay of Bengal. I mean, it is very vividly penned by uh, Amrit, Sunil S. Amrit in his famous book titled Crossing Bay of Bengal. So historical aspects also need to be understood, because the Bay of Bengal in 19th century, early 19th century, was the one of the most important economic area in the world. We have the historians worked in the in and around the Bay of Bengal. Professor Kenneth Hall, Sunil Amrit, Rila Mukherjee, Himanshu Bare, they all come to a conclusion that the integration in the Bay of Bengal is a possibility. The only thing that we need to work very hard in understanding the historical perspective as well. Finally, I just want to conclude my initial remarks saying that I always look at the Bay of Bengal as part of our life. It is part of our life. That needs to be understood clearly well. Thank you.
My question might have sounded like I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I'm just trying to play a bit of a devil's advocate.
No, I
Thanks,
understand. I understand.
thanks a lot.
It
I
should
think
be. Should be.
I think you put it in the correct perspective, and that's a good segue for me to go to Prashant Parmeshwaran, uh, and taking off from where Ambassador Nakandala left off. So we have the BIMSTEC format, which is a work in progress, if I might put it like that, and we have the ASEAN, which is not really a work in progress. It's there, and it's a successful model in its own way. Uh, how do the two converge? That's what is interesting, because we understand that Thailand is a part of both. It's at the intersection of both. So is Myanmar, but then Myanmar is sometimes in, sometimes out, and we'll come to Myanmar a little later. But Thailand is very much at the intersection of ASEAN and India. So how does this dynamic then play out between what we are trying to do in BIMSTEC? How do we then take it with India's, for example, look east policy? I think everybody else also has a look east policy, because that's the region of real growth. Uh, how does this interaction work out? What is required for the countries, especially in BIMSTEC, to align themselves and connect themselves much more closely to ASEAN in terms of trade, in terms of connectivity? What, in your view, needs to be done? Prashant.
Great, thanks a lot, and thanks to ORF for the invitation. I guess let me just say before I get into the substance of your question, which I think is a really great question. Let me just say I very much associate myself with the ambassador's comments about trying to view institutions in generally, also BIMSTEC, but I think also ASEAN, in terms of a longer term perspective, and in terms of kind of the broader regional welfare, because I think it's a very challenging time. You mentioned BIMSTEC as well. I think ASEAN has had its own set of challenges as well. So as part of the Wilson Center project, which I'm associated with. So I've been to 10 of the 11 countries in Southeast Asia within the past year, and various angles that we're sort of working on, including institutional engagement, minilateralism, major power competition. But I think in all of these countries, there's a very humble recognition that we are living in a very polarized time where increasingly the conversation is about divergences rather than convergences. So I very much appreciate the spirit of your question, which is about, how can we actually work together and bring these institutions together as well. So I was in Thailand last year for a bit in November and December. I was there as well in May and June, and had a chance to get to the Thailand-Myanmar border on my last trip as well. And I think it's a very humbling experience because within Southeast Asia, I think there are a whole host of agenda items that the countries are dealing with. So if you look at some of even the public polls, right? Forget public perceptions and conversations. If you look at Singapore's Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, the data that they've come up with in their annual survey, Myanmar ranks of the 10 issues that they asked elites in Southeast Asia, so not the public, the elites in Southeast Asia who are running the institutions or aware of the problems. Myanmar ranks the seventh out of the 10 issues that were asked. So the only three issues that rank lower, I think, include the U.S. election and a bunch of other more general, generic economic and security issues. So the Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas situation, U.S.-China competition, South China Sea, all of these issues rank higher than the situation in Myanmar. So I think there's a big worry that there's a sense of drift within parts of Southeast Asia about how important the situation in Myanmar is. And since we are dealing with a situation where within BIMSTEC, Thailand and Myanmar are really the two big countries in Southeast Asia that we're dealing with, that's a very concerning development in terms of Myanmar. I would also just add the Asia Foundation just did a survey, which is pretty terrific if you want to look at granular perceptions of Thais about foreign policy issues. And one of the things that they found was quite depressingly, next to Cambodia, which, given Thailand's history with Cambodia is not surprising, Thais perceive Cambodians as taking advantage of Thailand rather than being a friend to Thailand by 48% to 25%. But the next one there is Myanmar, which is seen as taking advantage of Thailand by 48% versus being a friend to Thailand at 24%. So there is a very sort of palpable sense, I think, of kind of frustration, a little bit of a sense of nationalism, I think, that you can see in parts of Southeast Asia. I also think I happened to have a chance to be in Malaysia just a couple of months ago and then late last year as well. And even there, Malaysia is inheriting the ASEAN chairmanship. There's a lot of optimism, perhaps, that Malaysia will be able to kind of shore up leadership within ASEAN, given the fact that Laos is holding the chairmanship this year. But even in Malaysia, there's a huge sense of frustration that the country has taken a very huge burden in terms of Rohingya refugees. And actually, that's beginning to filter in a very negative way in terms of the population. So lots of conspiracy theories flying around. Sometimes I even get WhatsApp messages from some of my, friends and counterparts with misinformation about the Rohingyas running smuggling rackets in parts of Malaysia, which is, I mean, really ludicrous and extremely sad that is the perception that is being propagated. But I think to circle back to your the substance of your question, which is how do we get convergence? I really think we need to sort of acknowledge that in spite of the fact that all of these countries may be frustrated as to what is going on, the fact is the decision by ASEAN to take Myanmar in as part of its expansion in the 1990s was rooted in the fact that it's always better, no matter how problematic countries are, to have countries within an organization than outside of an organization. And I think that mindset, if you believe that, means that you need to handle these issues, very carefully, but also with a sense of courageousness and boldness as well in terms of the sort of mechanisms that you're sort of dealing with. And I think right now in ASEAN, frankly, we're in a very sort of odd sort of dynamic where, as I said, partly there's a little bit of frustration, but also, frankly, the level of diplomacy and diplomatic engagement with the junta in Myanmar has increased over the past few months. And I think some of this has become public over the past few months as well. Even countries like the United States that a few months ago were saying, very rigidly, we should not talk to the military. I think you're beginning to see that play out in a little bit more of a flexible way. The big question, obviously, is where does all of this end, right? And how do we get to a point where we can resolve it? And I think even things like, perhaps freeing of political prisoners is a very easy place to start, but even access to humanitarian assistance in parts of Myanmar has been a very difficult thing to talk to the junta about, because they basically occupy less than half of the country. And there are still fears and questions about whether there might be potentially an election or some sort of efforts at shoring up political legitimacy that are going to take precedence over the situation. So I think that dynamic is one dynamic that you're seeing. The other thing I will say, though, is on the optimistic side of the ledger, the new Thai government under Srettha Thavisin has shown a tendency for more proactive engagement. And that includes institutions. I recall the foreign minister last year convening all the ambassadors, and unfortunately, now the foreign minister has left. Basically, it's a new foreign minister in Thailand. But at that time, BIMSTEC was seen not as an institution that was one of an array of institutions that Thailand was part of, but it was seen as actually being prioritized because Thailand had a stake in setting up this institution. It's not something like the OECD and some of these other institutions where Thailand is trying to join it as an aspirational member, but rather this is kind of part of the regional architecture. And I think that's very useful. The other thing that I think would be, just to end on a very positive note, I think you have a Thai Prime Minister in Srettha Thavisin who understands the intersection between geopolitics and very concrete functional areas where the Thai people can actually benefit from. And I actually happen to think that's a very good thing, because in all of the Southeast Asian countries, I think we're seeing a lot of questioning about, great, we're talking about US-China competition, but how does that matter for us, right, in terms of bread and butter issues? And I think Prime Minister Srettha is somebody who, if you look at all of his visions, Ignite Thailand, for example, that looks at sector-specific collaboration across, medical issues, electric vehicles, digital connectivity. These are very specific issues that intersect with what the ambassador talked about in terms of, you might not have these grand visions like a whole FTA, geopolitical and geoeconomic issues, but on maritime transport connectivity, connection to the Sustainable Development Goals, food security, health security. I think there's a lot of appetite within Thailand to actually advance cooperation on these very specific functional issues. And I would say that's really where I would say there's an opportunity for convergence, talking very specifically about things that we can work on that can not only shore up institutions, but also help our countries and our citizens understand, why are we doing this and why are we parts of these institutions? I think that's going to be very important in that.
Dr. Roy, if I can turn to you. So we've been focusing on the east of India right now. Let's just turn our gaze to the west of India. We're talking about connectivity projects on BIMSTEC and with ASEAN and stuff like that. But on the west of India, I think there are two very ambitious projects. One is, of course, the new IMEC, which is, again, a work in progress. And the other one is the one which you have continuously worked on for I don't know how many years, ever since it started, INSTC. Again, a very ambitious project, a lot of promise, and not enough, hasn't quite reached its potential so far for a variety of reasons. But I think from my point of view, what I'm interested in is India sitting in the center of the projects on the west and the projects on the east. How do we leverage our position? What do we do to become the bridge between the east and the west? I think we are ideally placed in many ways. I wonder if people even open the map and see how ideally placed we are, and whether there is this kind of thinking that how do we connect the east and west and increase prosperity in the region. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Sushant, and thank you, ORF, for bringing me to one of my very favorite subject, which is connectivity. I think it's been 2 decades plus when I started looking at connectivity. So I think, when I started working on, since I looked at Central Asia and West Asia, Iran becoming the connecting country for INSTC and Russia, But there wasn't much optimism on this connectivity projects. But I think when you are working in a think tank or you are a researcher, you need to get deep into the geography. And the connectivity projects, you can talk about it, but you only understand when you get into the map making of those corridors that we have been talking about. So I think the first exercise for understanding the connectivity project is the geography. And why connectivity? I think those are two very, connectivity has various dimensions. Be it economic, be it strategic, be it, bringing up some sorts of, cultural has always been, if we go back to history, that is, what I call reconnecting with the connect. So that has been, and it is easy to do. I think cultural connectivity is something which is possible. But when we talk about cargoes, when we talk about increasing economic potential of these corridors, when we talk about geopolitics, the geo-strategic dimension of connectivity, there is the point where, we have the challenges. Now, you said India is very uniquely placed, and I think it is very uniquely placed today. If we look at India's position, when we talked about the G20, when we talk about South-South cooperation, what we call ACT, Central Asia, and ACT West Asia policy, they are all very much in place. But I think when we are looking at Chabahar, I mean, the results have been mixed. So I am not a very pessimistic person, and I think these are very, very long-term projects. And to expect, deliveries in, 4 years, 5 years, given the complexities of the relationship, given the complexities of the major players and the regional players, and what their interests are. So I think the way out for these, challenges for India and how India has approached various connectivity projects, I would say, has been looking at bilateral, looking at trilateral, looking at minilateral and multilateral. That is how it has been addressing various projects. If we look at Chabahar, yes, I'm not saying everything started in 2014, but there has been a greater push. There have been ups and downs when we are talking about India, Iran, Russia cooperation. There have been problems of the US factor when we talk about the connectivity via Iran and Russia. And today we are, in the most uncertain world, I would say, which is much divided. And therefore, the regional approach, I think, is something which needs a greater push. And this is for the benefit of the countries involved. And in Chabahar, I think there have been positive developments if we talk about Chabahar project. And the second dimension of it is the involvement of the smaller states. When I say smaller states, I'm talking about, for example, Uzbekistan. India, Uzbekistan, Iran. These are the trilaterals that we are looking at when we're talking about the connectivity. There are problems, there are challenges which will continue to be there. But I think the most important aspect is to see the people who are operating, for example, I would say the Freight Forwarders Association. They are the ones, when we talk about these Chabahar, INSTC, these projects, what are their concerns? And to what extent, the Ministry of Shipping or the Government of India is able to address those challenges, and how much they are willing to, partner with them will also make a difference in the long term. Now, so when connectivity, is a very easy word to talk about, south, north, east, west. But I think the framework, the work, I think, has to start from the studies. And I'm talking about the serious studies which need to be done, not, as I said, when I started on the maps and in IDSA, we started, looking at and calculating the distances, the regulatory issues. So I think over the years, many issues have been addressed. If you look at the potential of these corridors, then look at INSTC. When I was, we had various, track 1.5, track 2 level meetings on the INSTC, looking at the increased numbers of the members who are joining INSTC. And the benefit which will come to various countries is huge. Now, is the private sector interested in it? What are the gains that are there for it? Trade is not something which you would do if there isn't traffic. If the containers are going and they're coming back empty, then how do you work those issues? Now, I think there are many issues, and then a lot of them have been addressed if we look at the various agreements that have been signed, if we look at whether it is Chabahar, whether it is INSTC, and even if you look at the recent meeting of Prime Minister with President Putin, then also the Chabahar INSTC, whether we're talking about the Central Asia Annual Summit, which never used to happen. We have a working group on Chabahar today. So I think these are the positives that we need to look at, and we need to look at as to how do we intensify, how do we address the problems which are there. When we were talking about, these are multimodal, corridors. There are sea, there is road, there is railways. There are also issues of tracks. So I think, solving these issues is not going to be so easy. But let me tell you, since I started looking at it, there have been development. There are missing connections. Now, as you said, there are reasons for it. But where do we go from here? I think we have various forums, in addition to the bilateral and trilateral cooperation. There are, we talked about Thailand, and I think Thailand I have looked at it from the point of view of the Asian cooperation dialogue, where connectivity is one of the thrust areas. So what I'm saying, and their cooperation with the SCO, with the Middle East countries. Similarly, we have the SCOs. It has its own limitations, it has its own opportunities. But I think for India, the best way to make full use of these regional, cooperative mechanisms is to finalize and see in sub-regional ways as to how you can push the countries for greater, smaller projects. So that is what I would say. Then I think you talked about the IMEC. Now, we've had an experience of issues and challenges when we talk about INSTC, why it didn't move, what were the reasons, what were the issues between Russia, Iran, or then the issues of sanctions. But look at IMEC. We always, see these strategic surprises, and the moment IMEC was agreed upon during the G20, and then Prime Minister Modi visited UAE in November, I think. I'm right, and that is when the first step towards the signing of the agreement also took place, where you have all the willing partners, whether we're talking about.
Before that, you had October 7th.
That's what I'm saying. Those are the strategic surprises. But you see, you cannot have a vision which will only be projecting the positive side of it. You need to be prepared for such strategic surprises. We are dealing with the region where I think it has given the maximum strategic surprises when we talk about the region that we are dealing with. But the good part is that each country now, I'm not saying that the developmental issues. Let us look at West Asia today. There are aspirations of youth. The majority of population in the GCC countries are 25 plus. They have their aspiration. There are educational. There in every aspect, if you see. And West Asia is not what it was. There is a major transition happening in the energy sector. There are diversifications happening in the West Asian countries. So there is an inward-looking policy, I would say, when we talk about West Asia. They also know that they are not going to completely rely on oil. There are climate change issues. So what I'm trying to say is IMEC is not something that you start today and within a few years you're going to get result. But I think despite the Israel Gaza problems, these are the things which might get a little pause for some time. But I'm more hopeful that this is going to come through in future. Maybe in few years. It is very, very difficult to say when, but I think all the partners are willing to invest. There are partners who are willing to provide technology. There is enough funds. It's only the political push and the crisis situation which has happened because of the certain ideological differences. And what happens in Israel in coming months, let us see. And most importantly, who is going to be the next president of United States of America would also, bring many questions or answers to the problems that we are looking at.
I think you've pointed out more problems than anything else. But look, I think all the points you make are well taken. The only problem to my mind is that if the politics works out, the economics is not working out. If the economics works out, the politics is not working out. And the problem really is that when everything seems to be working out, things are happening at such a glacial speed. And I have to bring in the C word. You have a country like China, which actually takes a decision and then goes ahead and starts delivering on some of its projects in double time. They don't take 20 years, 25 years to be able to do it. So the problem is that and this is the age when you're talking about youth aspirations, these are people who don't have a time span of more than 5 minutes. You're talking about 20 years, right? I don't see how that works out. But let me go to Anasuya, who's been waiting. I'll come back to you on this. But let me go to Anasuya, who's been waiting very patiently, because you raised this issue of, the bilateral, the minilaterals, the trilaterals, and the multilaterals. So, looking again further east, we have something called the BBIN, right? Which is a kind of a minilateral, if you will. And virtually every country of the BBIN is also a part of BIMSTEC. So where does BBIN fit in? Is it just a kind of an extra acronym which is attached to BIMSTEC, or does it have an independent identity of its own? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, there are this alphabet soup of organizations which we have. How do they all fit together? Anasuya.
Thank you, Sushant, for raising very, very pertinent and interesting question. But before going into detailed discussion on this particular topic, I must thank all my ORF colleagues to organize this timely, discussion. And good afternoon to all of you. Well, before discussing BBIN and BIMSTEC, whether BBIN remains just a part of BIMSTEC, or does it have its own identity? I think another important term that Sushant you have used is bilateralism. I think bilateralism is basically the way which has initiated the entire atmosphere of regional cooperation or across border, any kind of cooperation within South Asia. Because all the South Asian states, more or less, are much more comfortable in dealing with matters bilaterally, because it helps them to get a kind of resolution on a specific matters very quickly in a short period of time. So from this particular perspective, across border cooperation, states are very much willing to take up bilateral initiative. But even then, there is a kind of, balance between bilateralism and, more precisely to say, preferential bilateralism or beneficial bilateralism with functional minilateralism or multilateralism. Now we come to the point of BBIN. BBIN, it started long time back when it was regarded as South Asia Growth Quadrangle. So SAGQ, but now it took a new name, but it's like old wine in a new bottle. So BBIN, when it started its journey, BBIN had several, planning, and out of which I think one is very important, which has become part of BIMSTEC initiative as well. It is across border energy cooperation. I think BBIN has taken this initiative first, and then BIMSTEC has taken it up forward. And so you can see that one of the important connectivity initiatives that BIMSTEC has taken is basically enhancing or strengthening BIMSTEC across border grid cooperation, power grid cooperation, so which has started its journey from BBIN. But so far as, in fact, it has taken place in a bit where Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, they are in a single loop so far as energy trade is concerned. And these three countries are part of BBIN as well as important stakeholders in BIMSTEC. Well, in another point, as we all know about BBIN MVA, now which has eventually become BIN MVA, because we know that Bhutan has raised its concerns and didn't show its interest to take part in these MVA. So now it remains BIN MVA. And similarly, BIMSTEC has also taken up this motor vehicle agreement at the BIMSTEC level. So where we can see that BIMSTEC has its initiative to strengthen BIMSTEC motor vehicle agreement. So in a way, I will go back to your posing point that in a way, BIMSTEC has very strong BBIN component, but also it is not only confined with the BBIN component, because we know that in fact, three other member countries are very, very crucial in nowadays. One is Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Thailand. So BIMSTEC is much more than BBIN. And that's why I'm telling that it's not only confined within the circle of BBIN, it's even more than that. And also another important part of BIMSTEC is it's a bridge between two organizations. One is SAARC and one is ASEAN. So from SAARC, we know the other 5 members, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, they are members of SAARC, as well as they are the members of BIMSTEC. So as Myanmar and Thailand, both the countries are members of ASEAN as well as members of BIMSTEC. But when a country is a member of more than one in regional or multilateral institutions. It comes to the point of this particular country's loyalty towards this institution. I think for any kind of regional initiative and regional strengthening regional solidarity, the bedrock is trust, and also, how much they are loyal towards this institution. So, so far as BBIN is concerned, we see that all the four, designated countries are loyal to many issues, but one or two countries are not really comfortable with some other issues. And so far as BIMSTEC is concerned, within BIMSTEC, there are series of cooperative mechanisms. And I will go back to your initial comments. And as I am not very pessimistic, I am an optimistic person. I would put it in a different way that BIMSTEC, yes, we know BIMSTEC has started late, but it has gained its momentum. The pace is very slow. I agree with all of you, but definitely following Ambassador Nakandala is, I can say that, one important aspect is to keep historical trajectory of the specific, region where this regional solidarity is coming up is very important to keep in our understanding. So it will be extremely wrong to compare, the process of regionalism of South Asia or regionalism stroke sub-regional initiatives within Bay of Bengal region with the other parts of the world. So BIMSTEC has its own dynamics, and as we have seen that three C's have become very, very important nowadays within BIMSTEC understanding, and these three C's are connectivity, commerce, and communication. And so far as connectivity is concerned, as we have all seen that it has become a kind of buzzword, and without any kind of seamless connectivity, we cannot achieve anything. And it's very important if you look at BIMSTEC from India's foreign policy perspective. It's very important to know why BIMSTEC has become very crucial element of India's foreign policy. I think it is important because BIMSTEC gives a platform to have a perfect synergy, between India's Act East, India's neighborhood first policy, as well as Act Indo-Pacific, keeping the ASEAN centrality in our mind. So, and also it is important to keep it in our mind that we have shifted our foreign policy directives, focusing on maritime cooperation more nowadays. And within the BIMSTEC gamut, I think, as Ambassador Nakandala has specified about BIMSTEC master plan, we all know that it will be getting operationalized in the next forthcoming September summit, BIMSTEC summit. And within this BIMSTEC master plan, we have seen that maritime component is playing a very, very crucial role. And it's not only maritime component coupled with inland waterways. I think it is also important to point out here that once inland waterways were not considered to be included within the entire network of BIMSTEC master plan. Why? Because it was considered as internal matters of member states. But now it has been realized that it is very, very important component of the entire network of connectivity, and it is also important to strengthen maritime connectivity. And from India's perspective, it is also very important because, as we all know, that India has a prolonged understanding with Bangladesh on India-Bangladesh protocol route since 1972. It was, since its inception, it didn't take a place, but definitely after 2014, when Indian government also showing its interest towards 3Cs. These important states are coming up, and India has shown its interest to develop inland waterways in many ways, as we have seen that in recent times. With fruitful negotiation with Bangladesh, India has included another, national waterways, that is number 9 and number 10, by including, Gomti River into it. And previously, as we all know, that National Waterway 2 was designated as the protocol route. So these are happening. And another important fact is, all the within these member countries, again, I'm coming back to BBIN, apart from India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan are going to be included within the entire network of inland waterways. And when it happens, definitely it will give a good platform to get much stronger connectivity with maritime space, because here within BIMSTEC, India's bay is actually remains as India's maritime neighborhood. So it is important from geopolitics, geostrategy, and geoeconomics. Sushant, over to you.
Thanks. But I guess in this panel, I am probably the only pessimistic guy. So let me turn my pessimism back to Ambassador Nakandala. Anasuya talks about the 3Cs: commerce, connectivity, and communication. And all of these 3Cs can be trumped by the 4th C, which is conflict. And we are seeing, for example, we had Prashant talk about Myanmar, occupies a pivotal position as far as BIMSTEC is concerned. And we are seeing a conflict in Myanmar, sir. We are seeing some disturbances. Hopefully, they'll be contained. But we are seeing disturbances in Sri Lanka. And if they don't go beyond what has happened already, it's fine. But if they do, then all bets are off. So when you have these kind of conflicts, internal conflicts, which are also spilling over into other borders, for example, Prashant was talking about what is happening on the Myanmar-Thailand border. That is also spilling over into India. It's spilling over into Thailand. The entire concept of regional cooperation, connectivity, kind of goes up in smoke, doesn't it, sir?
You're right. What Anusha has brought, the 3Cs, and then you added another C, conflict. Yes, if there are conflicts, that nothing can be done. Now, I think Prashant has very vividly brought into the discussion about what is happening in Myanmar. If you see the geographic contiguity, Myanmar's participation, conscious participation and active participation in regional cooperation is very much important. As Anusha said, that BIMSTEC is the bridge between South Asia and Southeast Asia. Yes, that is very important. But the most important thing here is, I just wanted to take your memory back to 1950s, when the United Nations Economic and Social Commission decided to create 5 regional economic commissions throughout the world in order to rebuild the war-savage, not only Europe, but also South Asia and Southeast Asia. We had the ECAFE in 1950s, based in Bangkok. Now it is named as UNESCAP. In fact, 1950s, it was UNESCAP talked about the connectivity. I mean, if you read things like the Asian highway and the Trans-Asian Railway Network, constantly, I would say, even before ASEAN and all other regional organizations came into being, the champion and advocate of regional cooperation in South and Southeast Asia, including Asia and Pacific, was the UNESCAP. They continue to do so. And then 1960s, we have added institution called, of course, it was again a creation of UNESCAP, the Asian Development Bank. We have the ADB, we have the UNESCAP constantly providing advocacy and ADB to that effect funding. ADB has done a lot of things because much talked the BIMSTEC transport connectivity. Before that, there was a BTILS study, and ADB has done that. Lots of things have been discussed about. So since 1950s that we have been talking about connectivity. Now, in order to come, I mean, just to come to your preposition, the conflict. Now, when we have the connectivity, I'm not talking about the narrow connectivity, physical connectivity. I'm talking about the connectivity in all forms, digital connectivity, and then connectivity between hearts and the minds across the border. Now, that's the only way that we can address the conflicts. Now, I just wanted to say that for the last couple of days, I have not been able to talk to my friends in Bangladesh, my dear friends, because there is a problem. I mean, digital connectivity has been blocked. So this connectivity is very important. It is through connectivity we convey our anguish, we convey our desires, we convey our love, affection, everything. So the connectivity is extremely important. That is the only way. The judicious use of connectivity is the only way to address and sort out conflicts. And every conflict will end on the table. That's the connectivity. You talk to people, you exchange views. That's important. Now, how do we achieve this in the framework of Bay of Bengal? I don't think that it is Archimedean science. I'm happy that I mean Anusha also supported my view on the historical aspects. I mean, if you take the Bay, the ideas have migrated across the Bay of Bengal from Indian subcontinent to Southeast Asia. I would say vice versa too. Ideas, civilizations, genetic pool, whatnot, everything human has been transmitted across the Bay of Bengal by way of connectivity. Whether it is migration, whether it is a kind of trade and religions. So that's the binding thread between or across the Bay of Bengal. I think we need to be patient and very optimistic that will happen. What happened is that since the creation of course, everything got mixed up after the arrival of colonial powers into the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean. I'm not at all blaming the colonial powers, but I think what we need, in essence, what I would like to submit to you today is that we are not reinventing the wheel, but let us rediscover our common cultural heritage across the Bay of Bengal. When you come to that point, I think we can find many commonalities. That is the way to go. Conflicts are inborn with the human civilization. You can't avoid the conflicts. It is part and parcel of the human civilization. I think even I would submit this way, not very romantic, but then the mere conflicts have developed the human progression and civilization process. If we look at that way, in a positive way, I think we can find answers. How do we promote regional cooperation and integration in our region? Thank you.
Again, I cannot disagree with you on anything you have said, and all the positivity that you exude, but the cynic in me gets the better of me, and I'm going to throw the cynic in me at Prashant. While agreeing with everything Ambassador Nakandala said, my question is that, look, there are limits to what can be done to address conflicts in the region. Inherent limitations, which what other countries can do, especially in as much of a witch's brew which exists in Myanmar today, for example. Uh, and there are limits to patience, that nobody is going to wait forever till Myanmar can solve its problems so that BIMSTEC and other connectivity and other projects can go forward. Now, if that's the obtaining situation, how do we work around it? Is there some kind of a way that we bypass it, let Myanmar join at a later date, do whatever it can? But the problem is that it's sitting right in the middle, right? If I have to have land connectivity with Thailand, I cannot have it except through Myanmar. So how do we solve this puzzle, Prashant?
Thanks for that very tough question, Shushan. And
I don't want to wait till the next century. I want it to happen as soon as possible.
And let me just say, I very much also kind of agree with what both Mina and Ansuwa were saying as well in their comments about needing to be a bit flexible on which mechanisms we're using in these challenges. So for me, I get sometimes a little bit frustrated when I see whether it's the United States, other countries about who should join what grouping, and because essentially the issue is not which grouping we prefer. The issue is what challenges are we trying to resolve. And if we can do that for multilateral institutions, great. If we need to work smaller, fantastic. If some countries want to join groupings, great. If not, that's their prerogative. I would also just say I am actually quite hopeful. I see a lot of commentary sometimes in the media about the tensions between ASEAN centrality and minilateral institutions like the Quad. In fact, if you look very carefully at what's happened in Southeast Asia over the past few years, as the Quad has adjusted to, just to be kind of handed, right? I mean, the Quad has actually evolved into talking about major competition and China behind closed doors, but talking about technology and scholarships in the open, the public domain. And unsurprisingly, you see a lot more socialization of the Quad within Southeast Asia. I think actually in some of the polling that you see, a majority within Southeast Asia actually support the Quad now, which is not the case just a few years ago. And that I think gives me hope about the big question is whenever you design institutions and you're working through institutions, what is the agenda that you're trying to promote? And I think if you connect that agenda to as many people as possible and you make it broad-based, you're definitely going to be able to do that. But to return to your point, Shushan, about how do we deal with it now, right? Rather than waiting for the next century, I think we need to start with the notion of flexibility in terms of how we deal with mechanisms. I mean, you're right in the sense that we are in a very different place. I see a lot of commentary sometimes about, this is another cycle in Myanmar, but actually it's a very different geopolitical context, right? So what the BRICS meant 10 years ago is very different from what the BRICS meant now. Myanmar joining the SEO as a dialogue partner last year is a very different situation from what it meant even 5-6 years ago, right? ASEAN doesn't, to be frank, right? ASEAN doesn't really have the kind of stardom and sort of positivity that was associated with it back in the 2000s, because we were dealing with a very intensified geopolitical environment. And we're also dealing with an environment, frankly, where China is very bluntly sort of conflating notions of Asia for Asians with actually a China-first regional architecture. And this is why I think for Southeast Asia, India and other countries, Japan, are extremely important because they help put paid to the notion that this is not just about China. There are in fact various centers of power within the Indo-Pacific, and this is an Indo-Pacific where everyone has a role to play. I think Foreign Secretary Jayashankar has been very articulate. External Affairs Minister has been very articulate about this notion of, being very careful about how we talk about regionalism in a very inclusive way, in a very substantive way, but also something where there's a role for everyone to play in that regard. I think the second part of that is also, I mentioned flexibility as one aspect of that. I think urgency is the other one. Where I think the situation in Myanmar over the past few years, the statistics that we've gotten in terms of airstrikes on educational institutions, schools, and so on and so forth, there's really a lost generation that's at play here in terms of the people of Myanmar. And so I do really worry about the effects of that. And so the more we can decouple some of these big geopolitical issues about China and the role of Myanmar with some of the actual functional issues, whether it's humanitarian assistance, education, very basic issues actually that aren't very headline making. They don't really generate a lot of headlines in front page news. But I think that's very important. I think that discussion is going on in Southeast Asia and in ASEAN. The problem is, what is ASEAN's own, the United States likes to talk about this notion of what Secretary Blinken called variable geometry, right? The United States can work with ASEAN and work with Quad, but the big question is really when the Biden administration talks about this lattice work, right, of regional institutions. What are each of the countries' own lattice works, right? So for Southeast Asia and Myanmar, for example, yes, there is the ASEAN notion, but also Thailand as a member of BIMSTEC and some of these other organizations can do its own diplomacy through these institutions. That provides a very important outlet. ASEAN has also set up this sort of troika mechanism that hasn't really been truly activated, but we've seen some traction on it over the past few months where ASEAN has this big consensus-based decision-making process where they rotate chairmanships each year. But the troika mechanism kind of actually acts as a counter to that by saying, we're not only going to deal with the current chair, you're also going to deal with the previous chair and the next chair. The reason why that's important is, as Laos is having the chairmanship this year, they need to acknowledge that Malaysia and Indonesia have very important roles with respect to the situation in Myanmar. That helps, I think, bridge the divisions and kind of divergences that we see within Southeast Asia and ASEAN, which is probably the one which I'm most worried about. Lots of kind of tensions among Southeast Asian countries about how to manage this. Thailand saying, listen, we're the frontline state here in Myanmar. So Brunei and some of the other countries will listen to you, but ultimately the stakes are higher for us. And there needs to be some trade-offs within Southeast Asia and ASEAN about how to manage those tensions, even as we're talking about China, the US, and all of these issues. I agree that there needs to be a lot more cooperation in that regard. But frankly, these rotational championships mean that Thailand essentially has a leadership role in BIMSTEC right this year. They're going to become the ASEAN chair, right, in 2028 now in the revised timeline, because Myanmar is not going to take the chairmanship of ASEAN. So how do they think about coordinating these various mechanisms that they have? And then Thailand is also trying to join both the BRICS and the OECD as well. So very ambitious in terms of their aspirations. But to go back to a point that was mentioned earlier, you have to actually be invested in these institutions, right? It's not enough to just join, 5, 6, 7 different institutions. There has to actually be a way to manage that. The final thing I'll say is, Shushan, which is your first question that you asked earlier about India's role and why it's so important for Southeast Asia. I think there's a lot of handling about India's lack of perhaps economic integration with the rest of Southeast Asia and notions like RCEP. I actually, in my travels to Southeast Asia and conversations with officials, I don't really see actually a lot of this kind of looking back to what happened in the past. I actually see there's a lot of appetite for what are the flexible ways to think about India being more engaged in the region. Because ASEAN is used to various countries not joining institutions. I mean, Indonesia is not a member of TPP. The Americans withdrew from TPP, which they basically helped start, and now China is trying to join. So it's a very complex and flexible regional architecture. I think the big question is, what is India's kind of economic role? Because India's historical and cultural influence in Southeast Asia is, I would argue, second to none. But the geopolitical and geoeconomic kind of influence is something which I think there's a lot more of a demand signal from in Southeast Asia, not because there's any kind of, India's interest or India's interest, but a lot of these Southeast Asian countries genuinely want a more multilateral order. That means even though they might not officially join the Quad, it means that they want to do more with India, with Japan, with Australia, with the UK, with all these other countries. And so BIMSTEC and these other institutions are a way for India to also demonstrate that there are these connectivity signals within Southeast Asia, even though I agree with you, Shah, that we should always be wary of the gap between rhetoric and reality. So that's something which we'll continue to see. But I, for one, I'm quite hopeful if we take that kind of flexible approach that I mentioned earlier and marry that with a little bit of urgency on some of the immediate issues on the ground. I think that's probably a good sort of fodder for how we move forward.
Meena, do you think we have been taking a flexible approach on our West, in the sense that we spoke about the two projects, INSTC, which is fire, and we speak about IMEC, which is water, and we are trying to mix the two? What are we trying to do? Because, look, these are two completely separate groupings, right? And we are part of both. Is there a danger of falling between the stools, or are we going to ride both horses and win the battle? I don't know. I'm just wondering, because look, even if we are talking about obstacles and barriers to cooperation on the east of India, Myanmar being a case, conflicts, we are having a similar situation to the west of India. We have Pakistan, we have Afghanistan, not settled as of now. Things are going from bad to worse. So we have that, and we are doing a kind of a bypass out here, at least. One of the reasons for INSTC is that we are bypassing, and it's working, at least on paper. But are we in a danger of falling between two stools, or we have the capacity to ride both horses?
Thank you. Let me first answer let me briefly answer the first question that
You've still not forgotten it.
No. Because when China comes in, you have to, and this comparison between India and China, I think you try and take the positives of the Chinese policies, but let's not get into it. It's a dangerous game that China plays. And when we look at the connectivity projects also, or their involvement, I will give you just one example. And this is, I hope this is not to be quoted, but
It's going to be public, it is going to be quoted.
Then I'm not talking about it. But the way Chinese projects are, sort of dealt with, I don't think India would like to do it, number one. Number two, China has its, as very rightly pointed out by Prashanta, that it is China first policy. Okay, the Chinese are also into, making 99 years of lease. For what? So their intentions are definitely, not very, very acceptable ones. They have, and the Pakistan, I always feel, has its nuisance value, and it will continue to be a nuisance. And you should find a way to deal with Pakistan. You cannot ignore your neighbors. You need to have certain options and the alternative arrangements. Now, when you say East and West, we have to find INSTC or Chabahar, or even, the first map, which is, I think, roaming around, was prepared in IDSA. We worked out various options, including the one which goes via China. And Chennai-Vladivostok route that we are talking about today is being used. You see how things have changed. You've started getting more oil from Russia. Now, how do you deal with this situation? You need to get it to your country. And we are doing, I think, pretty good on that. So when we talk about IMEC, it is an alternative arrangements that we are looking at. We're not looking at mixing up, INSTC or, competing and saying, if this happens, then this can't happen. If Iran is with, Russia and China, then India has issues. But I think you have to carve your own space depending on your own strengths. And I think that is where the uniqueness of the India lies. So problems and challenges would be there. And when you talk about flexibility, yes, strategic flexibility is something which will give you more options. Multi-vector foreign policy is something which will, at least give you some. And this is what very beautifully is being, practiced by our Central Asian friends. You look at Uzbekistan and the example how they dealt with China. They said, if you are constructing the railway track, then you have to, train my workers. It is not that the Chinese workers are going to be there and, everything China will do, everything will come from China. So and the second project that they did from, Tashkent to Samarkand and from Tashkent to Fargana, which was done by Chinese companies, but they bargained. Now, this is called strategic flexibility and the multi-vector foreign policy, which they have. So they've become very smart. They want to gain. And if we are talking about IMEC, let's see the positive side of it. Regardless of what happens to Israel, and yes, there would be some hurdles, I think. But more or less, if you see the European partners, if you see the Middle Eastern partners, the West Asian partners, if you see India, and for the larger good, I mean, I would say, even the African countries would benefit in the long term. So these are, I would say, long-term projects. And I don't see any clash. I mean, in fact, I would go to the extent of saying, if China wants to build roads in Iran, so be it. Will they stop India from using those roads? I don't think so. So instead of, trying to, probably compete with China, we need to work on. One good example is, how as a part of the SCO, I mean, yes, SCO is not giving you everything, but at least you're not sitting on the margin. You're part of it. There is a consensus building. So you can push your ideas, your connectivity projects. China has always used multilateral regional institutions for their bilateral benefits. Right. Now, this is something I think which I don't mind. You go to the regional, cooperation mechanism and strengthen your bilateral arrangements. And that's the way you will have to move ahead rather than sitting and cribbing about, what happens, what doesn't happen. It will. It's a fast changing world. With technology, with social media, with, really the next crisis that probably we might see is the food security. Now, supply chains, there's so many aspects of it that the competition is going to be an element of our foreign policy issues. So we need to work out maybe, mini projects, smaller projects that would work, and then you move ahead from there. Now, I think this is what I feel is the right way of doing it. I don't see the clash and if India will fall. Yes, there would be hurdles because you don't know how the Americans behave, and the love for America and India is such, I don't have to say much about it.
You don't have to look at me to say that.
No. I'm not saying, I'm in general saying, one needs to have a very, very balanced and approach which benefits us. It cannot be like China, only Chinese interest, but which is mutually beneficial. That is why we are talking about building developmental partnerships with the countries. And I think that is the currency of India, and that is the uniqueness of us. And we need to pursue these things. Pakistan will continue to be, creating nuisance for you, and you have to ignore it, find an alternative view to deal with it. I think that's how I will.
We almost run out of time, but let me just say, can we just go in for a Q&A quickly? We have about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, so we can just go in for a Q&A. If there are any questions please raise your hand, identify yourself, identify the person to whom you want to put a question, and please go ahead. Anyone?
Mr. Sumit, we are talking about cooperation between BIMSTEC country. In our neighborhood, all the members having a big problem of youth job problem. So can't we have a cooperation in migration of youth like BRICS has a problem. They were having a problem of youth problem and elderly people having a problem of pension. So that split happened because of pension and youth job. So can we cooperate in this area also?
Thank you. I think we discussed this cooperation among youth when we met for the third Bay of Bengal economic dialogue in Bangkok a few days ago. This is something that we need to bring not a traditional method of cooperation, regional cooperation, but very sophisticated, because I think we all agree. At the time BIMSTEC was formed in 1997, now the technological advancements have gone unimaginably in the region. So this is something that youth cooperation among youth, the popularization about the BIMSTEC among the school curriculum. We actually discussed this, but I think I mean, we are very hopeful for the 6th BIMSTEC summit. If you read the Vision 2030 proposed by Thailand, pro BIMSTEC, that's the essence of the whole thing. So what you say exactly is very important, because cooperation among youth is extremely important, because they will be the future leaders in the region, and we need to invest in them. Actually, India has been doing that. Look at the number of scholarships that India has been granting, for instance, Sri Lanka. All right, that's the investment. That is where the youth collaboration happening, and exchange of athletes, and then all kinds of sports areas that has been happening. India, I mean, this is what one of the panelists said. India will have to is doing serious efforts to promote regional cooperation, and that is why, in fact, in 2014 I mentioned that there should be a leader, there should be a champion. I'm very happy to see that some of these ideas have been taken on board. I totally agree with you, but we need to do much more, because what we need to keep in mind while doing so, the youth is the future leaders of the region. We need to invest them, and we also need to teach them non-parochial historical aspects of the region. Thank you.
So my question is that
Whom are you addressing the question?
to ma'am.
Okay.
So we are always talking about our culture diplomacy, that we are stronger in that, but still we have our security footprint is very much behind than China. Like why we are not able to use our cultural diplomacy in better way? So that is my question.
These are two different approaches. It's like telling how effective the soft power would be. Soft power is a facilitator, it's a force multiplier when you're looking at the strategic issues or the strategic linkages. And military footprints that you're talking about, it has to be very carefully thought about, I am reminded of a big conference on West Asia which is being done in IDSA, and that's where the West Asian speakers, the ministers, very senior on positions, they said, we don't want boots on ground. That is not what we are looking for. I'm just giving you one example. So what we are looking for is the defense diplomacy, the cooperation in the security arena, the cooperation in the maritime domain, the cooperation which would be developmental in its own ways, training their forces. So this is the aspect which is probably free of, there's no controversy on these issues, and the countries are willing to make use of the strengths of India in that sense. But sending your military, I don't know what you mean by security footprint. Do you mean the military dimension of it, or security cooperation, as I said, when we talk about defense diplomacy? And there's been a phenomenal I would say, rise in terms of our cooperation, whether we're talking about the region that I cover, Eurasia and West Asia. So I think that is what my comment to your question would be. I hope I've convinced you.
Okay. No. I think there are no more questions. So I really would like to extend my thanks to Ambassador Nalakanda, to Prashant, and of course to Anasuya, who's our very own scholar from, and of course Dr. Meena Roy, who's never disappointed us. She's been an old friend and a sparring partner, and this is exactly what we were doing today as well. But yes, I think there are a lot of takeaways. For me, the greatest takeaway is, of course, the positivity which has been exuded in this panel by all the panelists except from me. But I hope you're right and I'm wrong. Nothing would please me more. But let's wait and see. But we hope to have you again sometime in the future. Thanks a lot for being part of this panel. And thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.